Welcome to the Sports Scouting Report podcast with Lee Brecheen.
Hi, everyone. Lee Brecheen with the Sports Scouting Report. Hope everybody's having a great morning and afternoon. Really got a great show today. Our topics are going to be the NFL Draft, the first round of the NFL Draft, LSU, any Louisiana natives that were taken. Also, we're going to talk about the Louisiana natives that play for SEC schools. So Southeastern Conference, all the Louisiana players, I'm going to break down their positions, what high school they went to, what they did in 2019, and what they're probably going to be doing in 2020 on the starting lineup, or if they're backups, and if they have pro ability. So we're going to go through the whole Southeastern Conference and break down all the Louisiana natives. We're also going to talk about Dan Marino. We're going to spotlight Dan Marino as our first ever topic about gridiron greats, the retired gridiron greats, people that are retired from the NFL, and spotlight Dan Marino and the Miami Dolphins. Was a childhood favorite of mine growing up, and I'm sure a lot of people listening. And we also have our mailbag. People write in and ask us questions. One of those would be baseball related, and also basketball related.
It's time for the NFL Draft Report.
I want to go ahead and get into the show and get into the NFL Draft in segment one right now. The first round is always exciting. Actually, I don't know how many people would agree with me, but last night was probably the first TV program that I enjoyed in probably 6 weeks, since this coronavirus started. It was like the Super Bowl, and I don't know how many people would agree with me, but it just felt like the best thing, the hobby's back, at least some hope to see all these college football players taken from your prospective colleges where you're fans. And, obviously most of us are LSU fans in Louisiana. But to be able to take that in was just so good, I think, for a lot of us in America. A lot of people were they probably broke records. I'm sure that'll come out today on how many people viewed the NFL draft. I thought it went really well, too, considering that, no one was at one location. Everybody was satellite at their home, or, everybody was, plugged into their computers. I thought it was pretty cool to see everybody at their houses with their families. I liked it. But to go ahead and get into the draft, LSU had 5 first-round picks, which is a school record. I thought they would have 7. If you heard me on the show about 2 weeks ago, I thought that Grant Delpit would probably go in the first round, and Christian Fulton. I think what happens in NFL, if you watch the draft, I've watched it for over 30 years. What's becoming the trend the last 10, 15 years is that speed and size trumps college production sometimes. And what I mean by that is, I guess when you're a fan of a college, let's just say LSU, you're too zoned in on your top players for LSU and what they did, their accolades, and, what they won, what awards they won, and all the measurables and all that stuff. But you got to look at it this way. These NFL scouts, these general managers, these head coaches, they're never going to tell the media who they're going to draft. They're always going to keep some guys, hidden. They're worried about other teams wanting to draft the guy that they want that nobody's talking about, and, yada, yada, yada. But There were players in this draft that went over some LSU players, and you might have some LSU fans that are upset, and what I mean by size and speed trumps production in college is that if you're the bigger DB, you're the faster DB, you're going to get drafted, earlier. You're going to go first. And what I mean by that is Christian Fulton from Archbishop Rummel, who I think is going to be a great cornerback in the NFL. He's going to be a phenomenal corner. I thought he should have went in the first round. A little puzzled why, 4 corners went in front of him. I can understand the kid from Ohio State going, high in the draft. I don't think he's the second or third pick in the draft, but, Fulton was not as fast on film and didn't have the production of, the interceptions. But the speed of some of these guys, and I think C.J. Henderson went above Fulton because he's bigger. And some of the other corners probably went ahead of him because they're probably a little faster. And I'm not talking about hand time. I'm talking about game time, like game film in games. They watch a lot of film. And I tell this to high school dads and moms all the time. It's not what you're timed in the 40 in shorts, and it's not what you do at the combine to get you drafted. It might position you. It's what you do in a game. Like, how fast do you look in a game? What's your size? So speed and size always trumps production. And that's what I think happened to Fulton and Grant Delpit for this year. This year was, I don't know why Delpit didn't go in the first round, but no safeties. Typically, safeties don't go in the first round. Unless you're Sean Taylor, the late Sean Taylor, went to the Washington Redskins way back, or you're a LaRon Landry, or you're just that ready to come in and be a Pro Bowler. Jamal Adams from LSU. But some interesting stats from the draft. And I really want to throw this out there to LSU fans. Oklahoma, when LSU beat Oklahoma in the playoffs, when the game was over, the media said, yeah, Oklahoma's not that good. They're overrated. And even a lot of LSU fans would say, man, that was an easy win over Oklahoma. All they have is Jalen Hurts. And that's all you heard. All they have is Jalen Hurts. Well, no. And I told a lot of my friends this. LSU just made Oklahoma look bad. LSU was that good, but Oklahoma was a good football team. If you go by the draft, they have 2 first-round picks. There's no way you can say Oklahoma is a bad team with 2 first-round picks. C. Lamb, the receiver, Kenneth Murray, their linebacker, who LSU ran over many times. And then they had Jalen Hurts. So, if you have 3 All-American players and 2 first-round picks in the first round, how can anybody say that Oklahoma was a bad team? LSU just made them look bad. That's what we typically do when you win that big. You just go, oh, they're not that good. No, they were that good. LSU just made them look bad. Another thing about the draft, the Pac-12 only had 3 first-round picks. That's why the Pac-12's not in the playoffs. Remember when the Pac-12 would put about 10 players in the first round every year between USC and Arizona State, Cal, UCLA? You don't even hear of UCLA players going in the first round anymore. But only 3 first-round picks. A record 15 first-round picks by the Southeastern Conference. 15 first-round picks. Unbelievable. Here's a great stat for LSU fans. And I jotted this down last night. 14 of the first-round picks, 14 LSU played against. And 19 of the 32 first-round picks were either LSU first-round picks or they played against them. So 19 of the 32. Is that just absolutely crazy? Think about that. 14 players that went in the first round. The LSU football team played against their teams and played against those players. And then you take the 5 LSU first-round picks out of it, and you get, that's 19 of the 32. That's just insane. That just backs up again why this was the greatest team ever. You basically played against every player taken in the first round, except 12 kids. Incredible. My favorite picks in the draft, I'm a big defensive guy. And I don't think if you ever ignore a future Hall of Fame D tackle, if you pass on I call a big-time starting defensive tackle or rare D tackle, I don't understand that to this day with NFL teams. I do not understand why Derek Brown did not go as the second pick from Auburn. Was the most dominant, most disruptive, most talented D tackle DN I've seen play college ball in a long time. And I have no idea. I'm clueless. How does this kid not go as the second pick behind Joe Burrow? Derek Brown is probably the worst thing that ever happened to the New Orleans Saints going to Carolina. I mean, Derek Brown is a man-child that is just, he reminded me of Reggie White in college. He reminds me of that build, that strong bull rush, that effort, strength, his size, 6'5", 315, runs a 4.8 40, but backs it up. And then the 49ers, they just know how to draft the other D tackle that's dominant to me. It's Javon Kinlaw from South Carolina. And this is guys, 6'5", 310, 4.7 40. He was unstoppable in the SEC. One of the reasons Georgia lost to South Carolina this year was Kinlaw was dominating the whole O-line you saw going the draft yesterday. Georgia had 2 first-round picks in the first round. And Kinlaw dominated Georgia's offensive line. I wish Tua well in Miami if he stays healthy. He's a Hall of Famer. If he doesn't, it'll be another bad investment by the Dolphins. But I wish the kid well. I hope he does stay healthy. I think Tua is one of the best left-handers to go in the draft. Kid just needs to stay healthy. I'm not a fan of Justin Herbert, the quarterback from Oregon, going to Chargers. I just don't think the kid – I just don't see the toughness in Justin Herbert. Watched a lot of Pac-12 games this year. I don't think he faced many good defenses. And when he faced a good defense in Auburn, he had a horrible game. He could not do anything. Just not a very tough guy in the pocket. When you rush him, the pocket breaks down. Against a good defense, he just didn't do well. He didn't make good decisions. And just didn't have I didn't see that moxie in him, that just toughness that you see in a lot of these quarterbacks. But again, he's got all the measurables, and he has the production. A little thoughts on the LSU players going in the first round. I think Justin Jefferson went to a great team. I like Minnesota. They're always going to be right there to make the playoffs. Happy to see that he's with a good team. Going to catch a lot of passes because they don't have a lot of big-time receivers. Patrick Queen, man, I'm just so happy for Queen being the first LSU draft pick of the Baltimore Ravens. Isn't that crazy? He's also the first player from Livonia to go in the first round. Congrats for the town of Livonia, man. I remember seeing Patrick Queen play at Livonia as a running back. He was a running back. He rushed for almost 5,000 yards as a running back, kind of like what Devin White did at North Webster prior to coming to LSU. So he's the second former running back to make All-State in Louisiana to go to LSU and become a linebacker in the NFL. Devin White, now Patrick Queen. And going into day 2, how cool is this? Livonia High School has never had a player drafted. And in day 2, they'll have their second player drafted from Livonia. From Mississippi State, they'll have a receiver from Mississippi State go in the draft. I think he'll go second or third round. Pretty neat, though. Livonia having 2 players drafted. Chasson from LSU going to Jacksonville. That's interesting. They need help. I think he'll start right away because they're trading off all the vets. Problem is Jacksonville won't be a playoff team this coming year unless there's a miracle. I know Doug Marrone's a heck of a coach. I know Doug Marrone when he was at Syracuse as the head coach. I used to meet with Doug Marrone for recruiting when he was at Georgia Tech years ago, and he signed a guy by the name of Greg Gathers out of East St. John. And also he signed a kid by the name of Watkins from East St. John, a receiver. Was responsible for a lot of good players, and I helped him on a lot of those guys. Remember sitting down with Doug Marrone at Waffle House in Laplace back in the day and going over players to recruit for Georgia Tech when Doug Marrone was an assistant at Georgia Tech. That's what I love about this business. And finally, if you listen to our podcast 2 weeks ago, I mentioned, and we might play it today, I mentioned that Clyde Edwards Hellyer would not shock me if he went in the first round. I mentioned that 2 or 3 times. No mock draft had Clyde in the first round. I think he's the most unique player in the draft. And so did the Super Bowl champions. What a great franchise to draft Clyde. Man, Clyde just got on a phenomenal team with the best young quarterback in the league in Mahomes, with the best tight end in the NFL, Kelsey, and then joins Tyrann Mathieu from LSU, Darrell Williams from LSU. If Mo Claiborne can get re-signed from LSU, defensive back. And, Kansas City's got a chance to go back to the Super Bowl, and I think they just landed another key piece in Clyde Edwards Hellyer. What a great kid. And I'm just so glad he's going to a winning team. And they're going to utilize him. Now, he doesn't have to be the guy. He's just going to be one of the guys. Day 2, expect a lot of LSU players to go in the second and third round. I predicted that LSU would have another 10 kids, maybe 12, go in rounds 2 and 3 combined. You're going to see Damian Lewis probably go in the second round, Jacob Phillips, Lloyd Cushenberry, Sadiq Charles. Those are some good players. And then you're going to see the rest of these big names fall down in the second round. Christian Fulton, Grant Delpit. And you might have a couple of surprises in the second or third round from LSU. I think Rashard Lawrence will go in the third round. You might see Moss go in the third round, LSU's tight end. Don't count out Michael Divinity maybe going in the third. Could be third. Probably fourth or fifth, but you never know. And then later in the draft, you'll see Blake Ferguson get drafted as a long snapper. I think he'll go round 7 or 6. Stephon Sullivan late in the draft. Braden Fajuco will go later in the draft, I believe. Derek Dillon has a shot to go late in the draft, and so does Adrian McGee and Badori Tabar, the offensive tackle from Massachusetts. All those guys have a chance to go late in the draft. I'm excited, though. Day 2, which would be 7 o'clock tonight, Friday night, is the second and third round. And again, I think the United States, this country's really needed this draft. We all love our hobbies. We all love to follow our sports programs. We work hard. This is a hard-working country. Everybody loves to work, and we have to. Some people have a lot of, have kids and a family and wives. And, sports is our relief, Sports is what we turn to when you're not going to church and or when you're not with your family. And a lot of people are with their families at sporting events. It's a family thing for a lot of us. It's tradition. But it's so good to have the draft. Again, I thought it went great. When we come back, we're going to go to segment 2. We're going to talk about the Louisiana natives that play for SEC football programs in college football, our Louisiana natives. We'll be right back.
Parents, are you looking for advice on getting your high school athlete recruited by the right college? Lee Brecheen is your answer. Lee has been doing it for over 30 years. He knows the ropes, and more importantly, he knows the people. Lee offers turnkey service from evaluation, creating highlight tapes in the correct format, and complete guidelines for effective communication with the schools. No matter the sport, girl or boy, no matter what grade your child is in, let Lee Brecheen help match your child to the right college fit. Go to our website, lafootballmagazine.com, and get connected today.
It's time for a Louisiana native update around the SEC.
Welcome back to segment 2, everyone. Hope you're enjoying the show. The Sports Scouting Report. We've got a great segment right now. We're going to talk about the Louisiana natives that play football in the Southeastern Conference, one of the best conferences in America, the SEC. Lots of Louisiana natives that are doing well in the Southeastern Conference. And I thought it would be interesting, for people that are driving that hear this, or people at home on their computer listening to this. I think, I want to bring ideas that people would really be interested in. Information's always good. And, I did some research, and obviously I keep up with a lot of these players because I watched every one of these kids in high school play football. So not just having names thrown out that play at colleges, but actually can talk about them and know who they are by seeing them play back when they were in school in Louisiana. Before we get into that, I just want to say anybody that's a fan of the show, please be sure to subscribe or like and download the any of our shows. So that helps us grow and helps us with local businesses and also just keep growing, keep growing the show every week, every month. So be sure to it's free to do it, to subscribe. Just hit the subscribe button or download any of the shows, just, because they look at downloads to grow your podcast. But let me go ahead and get into our schools in the SEC, the Southeastern Conference, that have football players from Louisiana. I'm going to start with Kentucky. Kentucky's on the rise, everyone. I don't know if they'll win championships, but I think Mark Stoops does a great job recruiting. He's had a couple of really good seasons back-to-back. Came close to beating Florida last year, probably even the year before, but they just couldn't finish Florida off. That's always the tough game for Kentucky, it seems, every year, is to try and beat Florida. They just, I think Florida has their number. But Kentucky has some football players from Louisiana, and they're gaining steam. I don't think they've ever had this many at one time from Louisiana, quality players. They have a redshirt freshman quarterback that's going to be coming back this year from Amite, Louisiana. And I want you to remember this name, Amani Gilmore. I thought LSU should have offered this kid 2 years ago when he signed in 2018. He redshirted last year. 6'2", about 214 pounds. I thought he a great dual threat quarterback, a legitimate one with an arm. A lot of these dual threat guys can't throw, but this guy's got a great arm. The only reason he redshirted is because he was probably about 195 or 190. Now he's 214. And he's actually has a chance to start at Kentucky this year. I mean, keep an eye on that. I mean, there was a really huge, let's just say it was very close. Talking to Coach Smith, Michael Smith, that's from Louisiana, that's on the staff. They came very close to playing Amani Gilmore. I think he did get some reps with the new redshirt rule because you could play in 4 games, but they came very close to giving him a start. I mean, they were really close to going with him last year. But this is a kid that LSU passed on, and they took Peter Parrish out of Alabama. And like I said, I thought this kid was a great player. And he's got a chance to be a 3-year starter or a 4-year starter for Kentucky as a redshirt guy. They also have a kid who walked on from New Orleans, Country Day High School. I want to mention these kids too, because walk-ons deserve their due, man. They sacrifice sweat every day in practice. They might not play much, but you want to mention them. But his name is William Natty, 6 foot 224 linebacker, senior coming up from Country Day High School in New Orleans. Got into one game last year. Typical walk-on stuff. Might play a little bit more this year on special teams for Kentucky. Kentucky also has Kelvin Joseph, who sat out from LSU last year. Kelvin was suspended. We all know the story. Played for Scotlandville High School. I think one of the best DBs I had ever seen come out of Baton Rouge. I don't know if it was maturity or just physically trying to get ready or the adjustment, but I think Kelvin's going to be blossoming at Kentucky, unfortunately for LSU fans. But Kelvin Joseph is a heck of a football player. And, he was beaten out, obviously, by Christian Fulton. And all the corners, LSU has a lot of talent at corner. LSU's always going to be stocked at cornerback. We're always going to have 4 or 5 real good corners. But Kelvin Joseph I always thought was a strong safety. I mean, he's 6'1", about 195, 200 pounds. He's going to be a redshirt sophomore. This will be his 3rd year out of high school. So he'll have this year left and 2 more years. Actually, he'll have a chance to play 3 years at Kentucky. If he ends up becoming what I think Kelvin Joseph could be, he could be a redshirt junior and go pro. I mean, he's really a great player. Sometimes when these kids get out of high school, everybody expects them to be 5 stars, week 1 or season 1. And it doesn't always turn out that way. And some guys just take a year to adjust. And I think that's what's going to happen with Kelvin Joseph. But Kelvin's going to be a great player for the University of Kentucky. You also have Joel Williams, who will be an incoming freshman from Madison Prep. 6'1", 200-pound cornerback, probably more of a nickel corner in college. I think Joel Williams is going to be phenomenal for Kentucky. Joel will have a pro future. For some reason, mutually, he didn't want to go to LSU, and I don't know. LSU just could not get this kid to sign with them or stay in state. But I think a lot of it had to do was to join Kelvin Joseph, who's from Baton Rouge as well. So Joel Williams will be a great player for Kentucky. I think he'll play this coming season for Kentucky. So you'll have Kelvin Joseph and Joel Williams in the defensive backfield, both from Baton Rouge, both pro prospects. And Amani Gilmore, the quarterback, and like we talked about the walk-on from Country Day. To continue on in the SEC, you have Auburn, which this is probably the least amount of Louisiana natives they've ever had on their team. But they signed a kid this year from Calvary Baptist, a defensive back. His name is Eric Reed. And Eric Reed is 6 foot tall, about 195, 200 pounds. I think he's a nickel corner, strong safety. In your recruiting services, they got him as a cornerback, but I think he's outgrowing the corner position. But I think he'll settle in at strong safety for Auburn. He'll probably play as a freshman because they're not deep at DB. Eric is a tough kid. And I had a chance to see Eric Reed play at Calvary Baptist this past year. He's very much a lockdown DB. He'll get in your face, and he'll be a great run support DB. He's more of an inside cover guy. That's why I think he'll be a nickel corner or a strong safety. He's more natural to be a strong safety. But Eric Reed, not the Eric Reed that went to LSU. that played for the 49ers in Carolina, but the Eric Reed out of Calvary Baptist in Shreveport. Arkansas. Arkansas always has a lot of Louisiana natives. First of all, it's close to Louisiana. You know, there's a lot of ties there with the state of Arkansas. It's not that far for a kid from Monroe or Shreveport to drive or fly for their parents to go see him. But Arkansas has a kid from Ouachita High School, Davion Warren, who's 5'10", 188 pounds, was hurt a lot last year. The year before was one of the top kick punt returners in the country. This kid's got 4.4 speed, legit speed. He's a pro prospect. Could be a slot receiver. Think of him as a more talented, the slot receiver this past year for LSU, Derek Dillon. He's a more talented Derek Dillon for LSU. I mean, just more polished. But injuries held Davion Warren back this past year. He's going to be a junior this coming year. I think he's going to be one of Arkansas's best slot receivers, and he's also going to be their punt kick returner. Has a chance to lead the country again in punt return average and kickoff return average. But remember this kid. He's about, like I said, 5'10", about 188 pounds. They also have Greg Brooks, who played as a true freshman last year and had 25 tackles and an interception. He went to West Jefferson High School. Started his high school career at Archbishop Shaw. That's where his dad played. His dad was a college football player and played for Michigan. Little tidbit there. But Greg Brooks is 5'11", 180. He's more of a nickel corner. Also could play true corner, but I think more of a nickel inside guy. That's going to start for Arkansas this year. He played a lot last year as a true freshman. Very impressive. There's another starting DB for Arkansas. They have a chance to have their whole defensive backfield almost from Louisiana for this coming 220 season. There's Joe Fuqua from McDonough 35. Get this. 87 tackles last year for Arkansas. 44 of those were solo. He's 5'11", about 201 pounds. He's a strong safety, big-time hitter. I love this kid in high school. He's number 7. His jersey's number 7. He's got a chance to be an All-American this coming year, and definitely All-SEC. But Joe Fuqua is a heck of a DB. McDonough 35 has put some big-time DBs in the college football. We're going to mention another McDonough 35 DB later for Florida. But remember number 7 when LSU plays Arkansas, and actually in any game, he's one of their best players. There's also Devin Bush, another DB from Edna Carr. You might remember Devin Bush, a 4-year starter for Edna Carr in New Orleans, in Algiers. 6 foot, 203 pounds now. He's kind of grown into a safety position. He had his name in the transfer portal and then took it out when the season ended this past year. Devin was one of the best DBs in the state over the last 4 years. Up till, obviously 2018. Devin's going to be a starter possibly this coming season for them, which will make maybe three of their 5 DBs are from Louisiana that start. There's also Andrew Parker, a very talented linebacker from Sophie B. Wright out of New Orleans. He's 6'2", about 238. He's going to be a sophomore. Redshirt sophomore. Got a lot of talent. Andrew Parker runs about a 4.7 40, pushing 240 in weight. The only reason he didn't start because they had a lot of older linebackers. He's going to have a chance to start also for Arkansas. There's also another talented linebacker from New Orleans for Arkansas, Kealan Burrell, one of the top linebackers I saw in 18 in Louisiana. 6 foot tall, about 219 in weight. He is going to be a redshirt freshman and a chance to play a lot. There's also offensive lineman Dylan Rackey from University High, who's 6'5", about 290, will be a redshirt freshman offensive guard or tackle, probably more naturally a guard. Will have a chance to start or be in the top 8 or 9 rotation for Arkansas. One of the names you don't hear about a lot from U-High, because everybody talked about, Micaiah Tongue, who we're going to talk about later with Georgia. You had, Michael Hollins and, all those other players from that class, but he's one of the sleepers. Turning to Mississippi State, always known for having Louisiana natives on their team. You go back to Orlando Lundy, quarterback that beat LSU in the 80s. Sean Smith, that played there from Bogalusa, was an All-American D tackle. Several Louisiana natives have done well at Mississippi State. This year, they've got quite a few. Aaron Bruhl, a linebacker from Archbishop Rummel, will have a chance to start. He's a redshirt sophomore. He's 6'1", about 240. Last year had 11 tackles and a sack as a backup. There's Sean Preston, who's a sophomore out of St. James High School. Played as a true freshman last year for Mississippi State. 6 foot, about 210. Will be an outside linebacker. Had 25 tackles, 15 solo as a true freshman this past season. Sean Preston's got a chance to be an All-American. His brother is going to be a junior this year at St. James, and he's one of the top junior defensive backs in the country for class 222. Just some tidbit there. You've also got a walk-on there from Brother Martin, Simone Anderson, a linebacker, who's going to be a junior, plays special teams. And you have a big tight end from Richwood that's going to be probably the starting tight end for Mississippi State this year, or when they go to a two tight end set, will be one of the 2 tight ends. Jaquarius Spivey had 3 catches for 32 yards last year. He's 6'5", 260, a redshirt sophomore, has a lot of pro ability. Kid can move. Great hands. You also got Quentin Harbor from Destrehan, who's a redshirt freshman, 6'1", 200 pounds from Destrehan High School. Quentin Harbor has a chance to be in that rotation. He redshirted last year as a signee out of Destrehan. You got Cole Smith. This is not a Louisiana native, but he's an LSU transfer who sat out last year, who's a Mississippi native. He'll be challenging for the starting center position at 6'3", 290. He's a redshirt sophomore, Cole Smith. The kid I like on the Mississippi State team from Louisiana is DeCamerion Richardson. I think he's the steal of the whole Louisiana signing class outside of Jabbar Triplett from Southern Lab that's going to Arizona. DeCamerion Richardson is 6'2", about 185. He's a corner, a big, tall corner. Runs about a 4.45, was an all-state basketball player before he started playing football at Bossier High School. Bossier High School is not known for a lot of big D1 players, but this kid's big time. You talk about falling through the cracks. DeCamerion Richardson has a chance to be an All-American. I'm going to go out on the limb. I mean, he's going to come in as a true freshman this coming year at Mississippi State as a cornerback. And, they lost a Louisiana native, Dantzler, who played at St. Thomas Aquinas, who's going to be in the draft. But DeCamerion Richardson, what a steal. This guy's LSU starting good as a true freshman or second-year player. They also picked up one of the top junior college linebackers from Amite, Louisiana, Tyrus Wheat, 6'2", 245, runs a 4.6. I saw Tyrus play in high school. He weighed about 210, ran about a 4.5, but he didn't have the grades, so none of the big schools offered him. But he goes to junior college. He does what you're supposed to do. He dominated. And Mississippi State's got him another gem. He's going to be probably a starter for them this year as a junior, right out of junior college. Remember that name, Tyrus Wheat. And there's one more player from Mississippi State from Louisiana, from Parkway High School in the Bossier City area, C.J. Morgan, a strong safety, one of the top DBs in the Southeastern Conference, one of the top safeties in the country, I believe. He's going to be a senior. I thought he was going to go pro. 59 tackles, 1 interception. This guy is big time. So when you watch Mississippi State last year against LSU and Alabama, a lot of teams, he is one of the best hitters in the country. C.J. Morgan will have a chance to go in the 2021 draft very high. I mean, he is one of the best safeties in the SEC and in the United States coming back for the 220 season. Could have went to pro this year and went in the first 4 or 5 rounds. We're going to take a break and continue with our Louisiana natives in the SEC. I think it's just something very interesting. Our high school coaches appreciate this, and also fans of football in Louisiana. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to have our third segment of Louisiana natives that play for SEC schools in the Southeastern Conference. We'll be right back.
Like what you hear? Well, make sure to check out our website, lafootballmagazine.com, for all of the latest recruiting information statewide. This week, we catch up with Tiger linebacker Jacoby Brock, Zachary wide receiver Chris Hilton, and we also will provide NFL draft coverage on all the Louisiana natives and college football players selected. So if you want to get your recruiting fix, go to lafootballmagazine.com today.
Welcome back, everyone. We're going to continue with our Louisiana natives that play in the Southeastern Conference. If you're driving or you're listening to this at home on your cell phone or your computer, be sure to hit the subscribe button or the like button. That helps us grow. That helps us have fan, and those are analytics that help the show grow. You know, as a podcast, if you like the show, please hit the subscribe button or the download button to any show, just one show, and that'll help us out quite a bit. Want to go ahead and continue. We're going to go ahead and talk about Ole Miss. Louisiana natives that play for Ole Miss. You know, over the years, a lot of players that have played at Ole Miss from Louisiana. I mean, again, the state's close. There's a lot of ties, and a lot of ties from going way back. Eli Manning played there, but obviously that was Archie Manning's son. John Fourcade was a quarterback there from Archbishop Shaw. Several great players to come out of Louisiana that actually, a lot of them were under the radar back in the 80s and 90s that ended up going to Ole Miss and doing very well. You had a running back from Scotlandville that played for the New England Patriots that ended up being a great player for Ole Miss. That went there. Ole Miss has an opportunity really to go in where you can play early. You know, that's where they get a lot of players from Louisiana that LSU maybe doesn't offer. And sometimes, one of these players will end up being great players for the NFL. Brandon Bolton is the running back that was at Scotlandville that's still in the NFL to this day. I think he's going into year 8 or year 9. But LSU really didn't recruit Brandon Bolden that hard, and he ended up being a great running back for Ole Miss. Shea Patterson from Calvary Baptist. There's been several over the years that have been there. They have a kid right now from Minden High School, a linebacker, Zakarian Baker. He's going to be a redshirt junior. This is going to be his first year to challenge for a starting position because they've been pretty strong at linebacker. But they lost a lot of kids this past season. So the door will be open for Zarion Baker to actually be a starter from Minden, Louisiana, Minden High School, who was a great player in high school. They also have a walk-on from Jesuit High School in New Orleans who actually got some playing time and started twice last year. Peyton Cox, C-O-X, Peyton. He's 5'11", about 310. He's going to be a junior. And he's on the SEC honor roll. I want to mention that too. But Peyton Cox, he's one of those walk-ons that actually is becoming a starter and probably could start for Ole Miss next year. If not, he'll be in the rotation of the top 8 O-linemen. Going to go ahead and switch to Alabama. They have some players left over there from Louisiana. Fedarian Mathis is a defensive tackle, DN from Neville High School. He's going to be a junior, about 6'4", about 290. Got 2 starts in 2018. He played in 12 games, 27 tackles. That's a lot of tackles for a D tackle as a backup. Fedarian runs about a 5 flat at 290, 6'4". Reminds me a lot of like Glenn Logan from LSU. A solid big guy that takes up a lot of space in those gaps. Probably a little quicker than maybe Glenn Logan and has a chance to start for Alabama this year. Dylan Moses from University High is returning for his senior season. He missed last year with an injury, mainly last year. He got hurt in the first 2 games of the season. Dylan's 6'3", about 240, and still is a big-time pro prospect. If he has a decent season, because he's so gifted, he'll time well and do all the great things you need at the combine. He passes the eyeball test. He just needs to stay healthy. There's Chris Allen, who's a defensive end, buck linebacker for Alabama. He missed the 2018 season and was coming back in 19 and wasn't really 100%. He will be in 220. He's another buck linebacker for Alabama, about 6'4", about 265. Will be a redshirt junior. Chris Allen has pro ability, too. Chris was a big loss for Ed Orgeron when he first took the head coaching job. This is somebody that Ed recruited for 2 years, and they lost him to Alabama. But Chris Allen has got a lot of talent. There's Slade Bolton, who returns for Alabama. He's a special teams guy for them. He's also their Wildcat quarterback, which I think this year he'll play a lot of Wildcat since they don't have Tua. So they're going to be in more 3rd and longs than normal. And I think without having Tua, I think Slade got in this past year a lot at Wildcat quarterback. He's also a slot receiver. And he's one of their top special teams players. And look, he's a wild card for that quarterback position. I know people might say, hey, the job's going to be this guy or that guy. Slade Bolton has a chance at quarterback if there's an injury, especially if the true freshman from California doesn't reach his ability fast. There's also Devante Smith from Amite, Louisiana, a wide receiver, will be a senior. Could have went pro this year and went in the 1st or 2nd round. Devante averaged 17.9 yards per catch in 2019. Had 1,256 receiving yards, 68 catches, 14 touchdowns. 3rd team All-American. Out of all the kids we talked about, he had the most accolades as far as an All-American standpoint, All-SEC, and probably the best pro prospect proven guy right now. You have Ismail Sopsher from Amite, who's a redshirt freshman D tackle. I still think once he gets into shape, he's going to be very good for Alabama. He's not going to start, but they're deep at D tackle. He will be in their rotation. They're back to having 5 D tackles rotate. One thing to keep an eye on Alabama this year, they might not be as strong in the passing game like they were with Tua, but they will have a better D-line. They'll have the old Alabama D-line. They'll go 5 deep inside. They'll go 5 to 6 deep outside at their buck D-ends positions. They also have Eddie Smith, who's a redshirt sophomore corner, nickel corner from Salmon High School, just paying his dues. I don't know if Eddie will be back. This is all speculation. But Alabama signed 5 defensive backs in 2019, and there's about 7 kids ahead of him prior to that. So I don't know if Eddie Smith will be back. I'm thinking he might be, he might not, but I might be thinking, going into year 3, that he could possibly transfer back to a Louisiana school. That's just my hunch. They also have Ronald Williams, who's from Faraday, Louisiana, went to a junior college, made All-American, 6'2", 190 corner. Will come in and challenge as a nickel starter when they go to 5 DBs on the field. You also have Kristen Harris from University High, who surprised me a lot. I mean, I love the kid. I think his family's phenomenal. His brother was a starter at Wake Forest and played for the Seattle Seahawks. But as a true freshman, to go in Alabama and start 12 games and get 63 tackles in 2019. At 6'2" now, he's about 244, 245, and will be a true sophomore. I didn't think Kristen Harris would go in and start 12 games and get 63 tackles for Alabama, but he did. He had a couple of tough moments like a lot of true freshman linebackers, but they had a lot of injuries, most notably Dylan Moses. They also returned a kicker from Mandeville High School, Joseph Bulovas, who's had 83 points in 2019, was 59 of 61 in extra points. 8 field goals made. Will be a redshirt junior. He also does kickoffs for Alabama. Most of his kickoffs will hit the end zone. He's really hadn't had a consistent overall season yet, but this kid can kick them 65 yards. We saw that in high school at Mandeville. I did, and a lot of people did, but he's a guy that just hadn't put it all together yet, but he's got a pro career if he ever could. One final player from Louisiana that's at Alabama is their only high school signee, Col Edwards from Destrehan, Louisiana. He's a true freshman. Alabama signed 4 running backs. You don't see that very often anymore, and not today's age. But Kyle was one of 4 running backs that they signed, and I don't look for him to play this year because they have 3 really good running backs coming back, and they got 2 All-American running backs in this class. I don't see Alabama using more than 5 running backs. He would be the running back probably number 6. But who knows? Things happen. They might have an injury or two, and he might work his way up. But Col Edwards rotated with John Emery, who's at LSU. What a backfield at Destrehan. Continuing on in the SEC, you got Texas A&M. They've got Glenn Beal, a tight end from John Curtis. Glenn is 6'5". He's now a whopping 273 pounds. He's a redshirt junior. The big challenge that Glenn has to play for A&M this coming year is they've got 2 All-American tight ends from the state of Texas that played last year. One was out for the year, and the other one was potentially an All-American freshman. So Glenn's at 3rd tight end going into the 220 season for A&M. Jimbo does like to use the tight end a little more than the prior couple of coaches there at A&M, but I keep thinking Glenn's going to move to the offensive line if he keeps getting any bigger. I mean, he's 273 pounds. That's a big tight end at 6'5". They also have Keldrick Carper from Plain Dealing, Louisiana. He's a junior, free safety. Got 4 starts in 2019, 6 tackles against LSU, had 8 tackles against Auburn, and 10 tackles against Arkansas. 6'2", 195 pounds. This kid has an NFL career, and I watched him at Plain Dealing. He was a heck of a football player. Went under the radar, wasn't an All-American coming out of high school, but, big guy that's probably going to play at almost 200 pounds this coming year, will probably be their free safety this year. There's Clifford Chapman, who has hung in there 5 years now from McDonough 35, is going to be a senior, a redshirt senior. 6'5", 200 pounds. He's a free safety, will be a backup. Actually started 3 games in 2019. Had 10 tackles. Recruiting fans, had 10 tackles against Alabama last year. Nobody would have thought that. Clifford Chapman, 10 tackles against Alabama. A lot of us follow recruiting. I know a lot of our listeners do, but Clifford Chapman, you would think, didn't even play last year. But he's a senior that's got a chance to blow up because he's finally over 200 pounds. He signed at 180, 6'5". Georgia, they've got some Louisiana players building up over the last 2 classes. Kirby Smart has really went after some Louisiana players. They just signed Cedric Van Pran from Warren Easton, who's a center, who's got a chance to go in and maybe start because they lost their center. 6'4", 315. Van Pran has a 4.3 GPA. For some reason, did not want to stay in state, just wanted to, leave the state and play football. They also signed Major Burns from Madison Prep. I think it's going to be a free safety. I think it's going to redshirt. Needs to get bigger in his more natural position, safety, not corner. 6'2", about 180. In 2018, Georgia signed Micaiah Tongue from University High, a receiver who hurt his knee this past year. Didn't hurt his knee, but redshirted. I'm thinking of Brighton Constantine, but Micaiah Tongue redshirted this past year for Georgia, and will have a challenge on his hands because Georgia just signed 5 receivers in this past class, 5 really good receivers, and they returned 4 receivers. So it's going to be tough. I think he's a talented player, but I don't know what his future will be in Georgia going into year 2 as a redshirt freshman. Micaiah 6'2", about 205. It would not surprise me after fall practice if he's not in the starting lineup, one of the top 4 players, because they all go 4 wide. But if he's not one of the 4 receivers after fall practice, it would not surprise me if he left to where he can play, going into year 2. Let's turn to Florida. Florida Gators. They have Brad Stewart out of McDonough 35. Brad Stewart's going to be a junior. 28 tackles last year, 17 of those solo. Started 4 games, played in 10 games. You might remember Brad Stewart from the 2018 season. He had a pick 6 against LSU, which sealed the game. It was one of the rare bad games that Joe Burrow had in 2018 in the Swamp. I think this was a turning point for Joe because after that, I don't think he had another bad game. But Brad Stewart was from McDonough 35 in New Orleans. Has a chance to be their nickel corner starter this year. He's a pro prospect. Jalen Lee, who signed this year from Live Oak, a D tackle, will probably either play nose guard or he'll be inside a D tackle or nose. I think he's a nose at this level. 6'3.5", about 300 pounds. Will probably get some reps because they lack depth at the position. A third player from Louisiana at Florida is Chester Kimbrough, a defensive back from Warren Easton. He's going to be a sophomore, a true sophomore, played a lot last year. Chester played in 8 games, had 8 tackles. He's 5'11", about 172, will be a corner, and will be challenging for a starting job. So you might have 2 Louisiana DBs starting for Florida in 2020. Go ahead and turn to Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt in Nashville. Donovan Kaufman from Archbishop Rommel was a signee for Vandy this year. It's going to be interesting to see what Coach does with Donovan Kaufman. He could start for you at running back or corner or strong safety. He might be the shocker. LSU kind of thought about taking him, I think, at one point, but Donovan's got a chance to be a phenomenal player at Vandy. It would not shock me if he's starting at strong safety or nickel corner or running back for them. They lost a lot of players this past year at all those positions. They also returned Kenny Hebert from Holy Cross in New Orleans. Kenny Hebert is going to be a senior. Had 7 starts last year, 34 tackles, 7 for losses, 2 sacks. Kenny's got a chance to be a starter and will be a starter, I think, in 220 for Vandy. He's 6'4", 232 pounds. And Kenny has played a lot of football at Vanderbilt. And he's not only that, but he's an all-SEC academic team. And he's one of those guys that, wasn't recruited by LSU, but has a chance to be in the NFL one day. He runs about a 4.6 in the 40, and he's a big guy. Vanderbilt just signed Will Shepard from Mandeville High School, a big, tall receiver, about 6'3", 185, 190. Who will go in and I think play because, again, they're short on depth and numbers at that position. Next up is Tennessee. We're going to talk about Tennessee and the Louisiana natives that play for Tennessee University, the Volunteers in Knoxville. They have 3 Louisiana natives. All 3 of these kids are not starting. Potentially one will start in 2020, and I'm going to start with the first kid. Kenneth George is his name. Kenneth George actually played at Acadiana High School, but had to go to a junior college for 2 years and did really well in junior college. out of Kansas, out of junior college in Kansas, and is a defensive back, more of a nickel safety, strong safety. Did start 6 games in 2019 with 19 tackles, has a chance to be a full-time starter in 220, 5'11", 201 pounds. Actually, Kenneth George has some pro ability. Had some trouble in the offseason, was suspended, was reinstated. Great guy. I mean, just under the radar kind of player. You know, he might have a great senior year for Tennessee. They don't have a lot of depth, so he might be a starter for them in 220. They also have Brandon Davis, a defensive back from John Curtis. You might remember Brandon Davis was an all-state DB at John Curtis. He didn't play a lot in 18 or 19, and so this is really going to be his year to challenge. Will be a redshirt sophomore, 5'10", 170. More of a nickel corner, not an inside corner. You know, not a big guy. You know, like I said, 5'10", 170 pounds. Great athlete in high school for J.T. Curtis and their program. Like I said, this will be his first year to really try and, you know, compete for playing time going into year 3. The third player from Louisiana that plays for Tennessee is Shea Bruza. You know, Bruza, you know, you would think an LSU name. They've had a former player by the last name of Bruza play at LSU. But went to Albany High School in Albany, Louisiana. Was highly recruited by Tennessee, and actually LSU recruited him pretty hard. 5'11", 188 pounds. Basically, he missed the 219 season. In 218 was played in 8 games. So 220, again, will be his first year to try and get some reps as a true junior for Tennessee. Again, another defensive back. All 3 of these kids are defensive backs for Tennessee. And I don't know if all 3 will be back. You know, when you're not starting within, again, your first 2 or 3 years, there's always a chance these guys could leave or go in the transfer portal. Again, it's just speculation between now and fall. You know, especially Brandon Davis and Bruza. Now, I think that George, like I said, is the guy out of all the 3 that has a chance to start this coming season for Tennessee. Finally, in the SEC, Louisiana natives, probably one of the best players that I've mentioned today, fans, and here's the guy that's going to be probably a first-round pick when he leaves South Carolina. And I'm going to try and spell his name correctly. It's tough. His last name's tough to pronounce. But his first name is Israel Mukamama. He's a junior corner that's from South Carolina, but went to high school in Louisiana at Parkway High School. Get this. He's 6'4", 205 pounds. Now, that's the size of a linebacker, outside linebacker, or a safety. He is a corner. Second team All-SEC in 2019. 59 tackles, 4 interceptions. And let me tell you what's so great about him. If you watched the Georgia game last year against South Carolina upset Georgia. And the reason they did, one of the main reasons, that Israel intercepted 3 passes from Jake Fromm. This might be the tape that the NFL scouts did not like. But this kid had 3 interceptions in one game. And he had the final interception in the final 2 minutes to seal the victory over the Georgia Bulldogs at Georgia, between the hedges. But, you know, most DBs never have 3 interceptions in a game in college or in the pros. I mean, this was a phenomenal game. If you watch the game, this guy was all over the place. But this kid's going to be probably a first-round pick in the 221 draft. I mean, they just don't have 6'4", 205-pound cornerbacks that run 4.45. But I hope you enjoyed that. I just wanted to go over all the Louisiana natives that play in the Southeastern Conference for this upcoming 220 season and break it down, not just tell you who their names are, but where they went to high school and their potential and what they did last year in 2019. I think people, the diehard fans out there, love that kind of information. I know I do. We're going to go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we're going to have segment 4, and our old timers are going to love this one. Segment 4, when we come back, we're going to talk about our legend of the week for the NFL, our retired legend of the week, Dan Marino, Miami Dolphins. We'll be right back.
If you are a parent that needs a highlight tape and you need consulting advice on how to deal with the recruiting process, please contact Lee Brecheen, who has had over 30 years of experience dealing with college coaches and making highlight tapes all over the country. For more information, please contact Lee Brecheen at lbrecheen@aol.com. That is lbrecheen@aol.com, LBRECHEEN@aol.com. It's time for the NFL Hall of Fame Profile of the Week.
Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to the Sports Scouting Report with Lee Brecheen. Be sure to hit the subscribe button or the like button to help us grow. If you love the show, please hit the subscribe button. It is free to do that, and that helps us grow with analytics, and it helps us grow every week and every show. But please hit that subscribe button, which helps us a pretty good bit. If you love the show, again, for us to keep growing it, we just need your support by hitting that so our analytics are continue to grow. I love this segment. It's a new one that I started called the Spotlight Retired NFL Spotlight of the Week. And one of my favorite players of all time in the NFL was Dan Marino. Dan Marino, to me, had one of the strongest arms and one of the quickest releases in the history of the NFL. I liked this guy when he was at the Pittsburgh Panthers in college, when he was playing for Jackie Sherrill. And we're going to talk about Dan Marino's college career and his NFL career. But Dan Marino played 17 years in the NFL with the Miami Dolphins. One team. From 1983 to 1999. Get these passing stats. 61,361 yards. 420 touchdowns. Incredible. 6'4", about 230 pounds. He went to Pittsburgh for his prep career. He was a Pittsburgh native, but he played at Central Catholic in Pittsburgh. And I know he grew up, they always said he grew up wanting to play for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame, NFL Hall of Fame, in 2005. 10 of his 17 seasons, he took his team to the playoffs. And, I mean, he was just one of the greatest ever. I just thought his arm was off the charts. I still think that Dan Marino had one of the strongest arms I'd ever seen in the NFL. I think a lot of old-timers will agree with me. If you're over the age of 38, I think you would remember Dan being just phenomenal. And he was, back in the 80s, 83 when he was drafted, he was passed over by a lot of quarterbacks. He was the 5th quarterback taken in the 5th round. And I think that gave Dan a big chip on his shoulder, not being the first quarterback, the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th. Now, there were some good quarterbacks taken in the 83 draft. Ken O'Brien was drafted before him for the Jets, and I think that was the all-time low for Dan. Out of Cal Davis, Division II. And, Ken O'Brien didn't really it didn't work out for Ken O'Brien long-term for the Jets. Tony Eason from Illinois went before him in 83 draft. Todd Blackledge, who you see does a lot of broadcasting now for CBS. Jim Kelly went before him, and also, obviously John Elway. He was the 27th pick in the first round in 1983. In college, 1979 to 1981. A lot of young listeners might not realize this because Pittsburgh Panthers, they haven't been a top program in the last 30 years, okay? But when I was growing up, and a lot of our listeners, And I want this so a lot of our young listeners will know this, but 1979 to 1981, when Dan Marino was at Pittsburgh playing for Jackie Sherrill, the University of Pittsburgh went 33-3 in a 3-year period. They had 3 straight 11-1 seasons. They had 3 straight top 5 finishes in the college AP poll and the UPI poll. Both polls, top 5, 3 years in a row. His senior year, though, he played for Faj Fazio. That's where he had his worst season. And they credit that for him going late in the draft, but that's just, I just think horrible because, I mean, he had 3 phenomenal years and he had all the, had the stuff, right? His senior year, get this, he lost to the Pony Express in the Cotton Bowl, SMU, Eric Dickerson, Craig James, Reggie Dupard. But what an early career of just phenomenal stats and what he did at Pittsburgh College. In 1982, you might remember the Sugar Bowl. They beat Georgia, Pittsburgh did, Dan Marino, in the Superdome. 29, they beat Georgia. That was a big deal. Probably their last huge team victory. It's been since 1982 since Pitt's had a huge win like that in a bowl game. In 1979, they beat Penn State. Now think of it. In 1979, Penn State was pretty good. Dan Marino beat them in 1979, 29-14. Penn State. He took his team to a Super Bowl against the San Francisco 49ers, and that was just the wrong team to play. Joe Montana, Jerry Rice, Fred Dean from Ruston, Louisiana. Joe Montana was the MVP of the Super Bowl. That was 1984. Miami had a 14-2 season. There was 851 total yards in the Super Bowl that year, which was a lot. At that time, it was a record. Combined yards between the 49ers and the Dolphins, 851 yards. Both quarterbacks threw for over 300 yards. Dan Marino has the most wins in a career without a Super Bowl title, which I feel for him, man. I grew up liking this guy. I was a Terry Bradshaw fan and I was a Dan Marino fan. And I like Montana. Growing up, my era of growing up watching pro ball. But I think what haunted Dan Marino, besides the draft snub, was not ever having a great running game. In the Super Bowl in '84, they only ran the ball 9 times. And most of those carries were for negative yards. They just did not have that great running back. If Dan Marino, and my listeners might agree with this, but if Dan Marino would have had like a Mark Ingram or an Emmitt Smith like Aikman had in Dallas, or Franco Harris like Terry Bradshaw had in Pittsburgh, or Roger Craig like Montana had in San Francisco. They had Tony Nathan. Tony was from Alabama, was a good back, but I thought he was more of a fullback. And then they drafted Bobby Humphrey later in Dan's career, but Bobby got hurt, who was also from Alabama. But Dan Marino never had a good running game, and it put so much pressure. They used to say, well, the Dolphins are going to throw. Well, they had to throw a lot. It had Mark Clayton, Mark Duper, who played at Northwestern State. They had the Hall of Fame center, Dwight Stevenson, who another Alabama guy, one of the best centers ever. A.J. Dewey was on the defense in the early part of Dan Marino's career, in the Blackwood brothers at safety and free safety. Bob Baumhauer was a great defensive tackle for Miami. But if you give Dan Marino a Hall of Fame running back, he wins 3 Super Bowls at least in his career, in my opinion. Even though San Francisco was really good at that time. But Dan Marino passed for almost 8,000 yards in Pittsburgh at the college. He was 4th in the Heisman his junior year. Isn't that crazy? This guy was 4th in the Heisman. It just... He's probably one of the most least talked about college football players outside of the Pittsburgh University. You know, I mean, it's amazing what he did there. I mean, beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, beat Penn State. When Penn State had Todd Blackledge and all those All-Americans with Joe Paterno, when Penn State was a powerhouse, they beat Penn State. Pittsburgh, I don't think Pittsburgh's beat Penn State since that era. A little trivia here. Dan Marino, when he was drafted in 1983, had to beat out a quarterback. And his rookie year, the starting quarterback for Miami Dolphins was David Woodley. LSU's David Woodley, the late David Woodley, who died way too young, passed away way too young. David was actually the quarterback with Steve Ensminger. They would rotate for Charlie McClendon back in 79, 80, 78. But David Woodley played at Byrd High School in Shreveport and was the starting quarterback when Dan was drafted in 1983. And a lot of people don't remember this. I know some of our old-timers will. But imagine this. He beats David Woodley out week 6. Okay, Dan didn't start the first 5 games of the season. Dan goes on to the Pro Bowl as a rookie, okay, with only 10 or 11 starts, and still holds the playoff record to this day. The AFC Championship game for passing yards and touchdowns in an AFC Championship game, that's 421 yards and 4 touchdowns against my Pittsburgh Steelers. They beat the Steelers 45-28. That was I think that was Terry's last year, or that was the year before Terry retired, Bradshaw. I think that was his last season. But, you know, Dan Marino is the spotlight of the week. Retired NFL players. I hope you enjoyed that segment. And look, let's give Pittsburgh Panthers a little love. They haven't had a phenomenal run in many years. And Jackie Sherrill, when he was there, I mean, Pittsburgh was on top of the world. They had Craig Ironwood Hayward, they had Bill Fralick, Mark May on that same team with Dan Marino, who ended up being great NFL players. They had Green at linebacker, who went on to the Buccaneers and had a great career at linebacker. They had all kind of talent on defense. They had Mark Stepnoski, who was a starting center for Dallas Cowboys for many years, who came out of Pitt. After this group, after Dan and them left, Mark Stepnoski was the next center there. But Pittsburgh is one of the sleeping giants to me in the United States. If they just keep those Pennsylvania boys in state, they're all going to Penn State, or they're going to Notre Dame or Michigan or Ohio State. They got to keep those boys in state. There's a lot of talent in Pittsburgh, just the city of Pittsburgh alone in Pennsylvania. We're going to go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we're going to go to segment 5, our mailbag. We'll be right back.
Parents, are you looking for advice on getting your high school athlete recruited by the right college? Lee Brecheen is your answer. Lee has been doing it for over 30 years. He knows the ropes, and more importantly, he knows the people. Lee offers turnkey service from evaluation, creating highlight tapes in the correct format, and complete guidelines for effective communication with the schools. No matter the sport, girl or boy, no matter what grade your child is in, let Lee Brecheen help match your child to the right college fit. Go to our website, lafootballmagazine.com, and get connected today.
Welcome back, everyone. Segment 5. We're going to go into our mailbag. Before we do that, again, I hope everybody will hit the subscribe button or the like button for our shows. Just that helps our show. If you like our show, it'll help us grow. And the more we grow, the better we can make the show every week, which I hope you're enjoying it. But our mailbag is when our fans can write to us, and we'll answer questions. The first question we have is from Jefferson from Monroe, Louisiana. wants to know, what team do you think would have won the NCAA basketball tournament if it was held this year? Well, Jefferson, I think the top 3 teams going into the NCAA tournament, my 2 favorites were going to be Kentucky and Kansas. I think Kentucky-Kansas would have been the championship game. That's just my opinion. I think Kentucky was they always have a lot of talent, but I think Kentucky had a lot of team chemistry. Those guards, they had 4 first-round pick, basically guards, and a big-time first-round pick center. They had a complete cast of who's who. All 5 of those players have announced for the NBA draft. I don't know if they'll keep their name in the hat, but I think 6 players total for Kentucky has put their name in, including Kaylee Whitney, who's transferring out, that's deciding to go pro. So that's 6 players. I think, to answer your question, I think Kentucky would have won it over Kansas. And I think Dayton would have been that team to make the Final Four as the dark horse, the sleeper team. The Cinderella team was going to be, in my opinion, Dayton out of Ohio. I like the big 6'10" forward for Dayton that's going pro. It's a shame we won't see what they would have done in the NCAA tournament. But the kid by the name of Obai Toppin, 6'10", power forward, a first-round pick, going to be a junior in the draft if he stays in the draft. Obai is a heck of a player. I mean, he helped that team get to the high rank they had going in the NCAA tournament, their high seed. But it's just a shame, we're not going to see the March Madness. I love that. Yeah, I love watching college basketball. But I think Kentucky would have won it. So for LSU fans, they don't get another banner, right? And Kentucky loses all of those players. So they're going to have a whole new team next year, which they've done it, Calipari's done this like 7 or 8 times. He's lost his whole starting lineup to the NBA, and he brings a whole new crew in. And so does Duke now, and Kansas, and a lot of these teams. They lose everybody in the starting lineup. They just bring 5 more All-Americans in, or 7 more. We have Kevin from LaRose asking, he wants to know, who are some LSU baseball players that you think could get drafted and sign with either a major or minor league team? That's another good question, Kevin from LaRose, Louisiana. Very unfortunate there's no college baseball season. LSU was poised to maybe make a run to Omaha. They had a great pitching staff. A lot of unknowns in the lineup, though, from the batting side. Here's one of those things. This is very tricky slope. You have no baseball season. Baseball, major league teams, they are all about scouting. There's nothing to scout. 14 games. None of that. That was all pre-conference. They were just getting into conference play when the season was announced it was over. But a lot of guys that were kind of on the fence to be 2nd or 3rd round picks, there's no scouting. And I don't, with the draft probably being shortened, they're talking about doing a 5-round draft or a 4-round draft. I don't know what they're going to decide. If I was these LSU players who are draft eligible, like Daniel Cabrera, I go back to college, because Cabrera was a guy, as an example, to answer your question, that could go pro. And if he would have played a whole junior season and had a real good year, then he's probably a 2nd, 3rd round pick. But not having a very good sophomore year, he might not be a top 5 pick. He might not be a top 5 round pick if they have a 5-round draft. So Cabrera, would probably be better off coming back to LSU and prove that he is, a high draft pick. And then you have Cole Henry, who's draft eligible from Florence, Alabama, LSU stud, Friday night starter. And this is going to be tough for LSU fans if he leaves, because here's a guy that could have been player of the year. I mean, he was that good. And he missed a lot of his sophomore year. He was starting off, looked like he was going to be Britt Laxton, or Ben McDonald. Throws 96 to 98 miles per hour, probably hit 100 miles an hour in the pros. So he misses his true sophomore year. He's draft eligible. But do you come back if you're Cole Henry? I don't know if Cole Henry goes pro or not. And I don't know if he gets to go in the first or second round because, again, he had some injury problems as a freshman. And the pro scouts didn't get to see him play a whole year healthy this year as a sophomore. And it'll cost Cole a lot of money if he leaves. If I'm Cole Henry, I come back to college. You're still only going to be a junior. And he hadn't pitched a lot in college, so his arm's not overused from the major league standpoint. But I don't think LSU has a lot of high-ranked draft prospects. Kevin, if guys go that are not seniors or juniors, Cole Henry will probably be a second-round pick, maybe late first. But if he comes back, he'd be early first round. He could be the first pick in the draft if he comes back for another year. Jaden Hill's going to be a high first-round draft pick the following year, pitcher from Arkansas. But again, I think it's messed up for the MLB and it's messed up for the players because if they shorten the draft and then they're talking about money's going to be kind of tight because of the economy, I would come back to school. If I'm any of these kids that are juniors or sophomores, I'm coming back to college. Get that degree because this is not the time to try and make a ton of money when you're not showing your full blossom ability. You missed that season. You don't have it on film. You don't have scouts watching you. There's no scouting. The guys that are going to go high in the draft are going to be high school guys, and they're probably going to push a lot of these college guys out of those 5 rounds if it's a 5-round draft, which is going to be bad for college baseball players. Because, MLB, they're going to go after these big-time high school kids that are probably going to fill up the first, second, third round. That's how they're going to get them to sign. Because if they don't sign those high school kids in the first 5 rounds, if there's only a 5-round draft, those kids aren't going to go pro round 5 if the money's not there too, if the slot money's not there. But I hope you enjoyed the show today, and I want to bring something different every week. I hope you enjoyed the NFL draft talk, our mailbag, Dan Marino, and our Louisiana natives playing in the SEC Conference. I just want to give information because if you're driving around in your car or truck, you're on your computer, you're bored, you're on your cell phone. I just want you to hear stuff that it's kind of like a small 30 for 30 narration on just history of information, which that's why I love the game. I love talking about information on baseball, football, basketball, and even track. Be sure to check out our website, lafootballmagazine.com. You can get our podcast there. You can like it or subscribe to it. Or also our TV show. Watch all our TV shows from this past year. They're on YouTube. You can see that on the website. And we're working on our magazine, Louisiana Football Magazine, right now. And any mom and dads out there that are trying to get ready for their kids for football scholarships, or their kids are going to be a senior, going to be a junior, get in touch with us. You can email me through the website, lafootballmagazine.com. Reach out to us. I hope everybody's having a great week. I want to thank everybody in the medical profession. Thank all those nurses and doctors for working 30, 40 straight days without any sleep, any rest. Prayers for all the families in the world. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Sports Scouting Report podcast with Lee Brecheen.